George Osborne once said, "The biggest single thing that has lifted people out of poverty is free trade." Keep this in mind as we discuss today the tensions between Australia and China and why is that important for you to know. My name is Dr. David Oualaalou,
And my name is Dr. Ross Stewart.
and you are watching Geopolitics in Conflict.
One of our viewers asked us to take a deep dive into what's going on between China and Australia. We appreciate it, and if you have other topics that you'd like us to discuss, send us a note. We're happy to talk about them. China and Australia have gotten at odds with each other.
That's correct, which came as a surprise for literally the tensions are escalating. You will think the two neighbors and they've been in a sort of a business relationship as far as trade and so forth. Nobody expected it would reach this level. I mean, it's getting very nasty between the two countries.
Well, I understand that the Australians are saying China is bullying us, which is not necessarily a surprise, because they might be. But on top of that, the Australians are punching back hard with their rhetoric. We don't like the way they handled this. We don't like the way they did that. We don't like that they're oppressing the people of Hong Kong or the Uyghurs. And they're being very vocal about it and saying, we're tough. You can't mess with us. We'll handle China, which I think is bordering on laughable.
That's correct. I mean, I don't quite understand as to why Australia is going into this frenzy of criticism of China. Yes, we talk about human rights abuse as well. Every country does that. Even Australia itself, they should not forget their own history with the Aborigines.
Which is dreadful.
I mean, come on. But the question as to Australia dictating to how China needs to behave, no, China won't have it. And China's response was that we just don't want to trade with you.
And all the commodities that China's getting from Australia are readily available in many other places in the world, and those countries are lining up to provide those things, such as beef, such as iron ore. You name it, it's available.
As a matter of fact, recently, just yesterday, China now approved a clause by which they will limit the import of coal from Australia. And Australia export massive amount of coal to China. So if I were advising the Prime Minister of Australia, I'd say you might want to take a step back and think through this before you launch into this. If China is your number one exporter market and you are creating those kind of issues, all China needs to do is shut down the door on you, which is exactly what they have done now with the agricultural aspects, like including all the agricultural stuff that they import from Australia, and the beef. Well, you got Brazil, you got Argentina, you got Canada, all of them are on standby.
So some people are going to benefit from this misunderstanding.
I'm sure. But also it's interesting enough is that I think Australians do not understand how China operates, because to me that's the signal I got from all the statements that I read about from the Prime Minister's office, but also from the Minister of Trade, the Australian one. There seems to be a lack of understanding about China. Well, it's a fact that when you look at Australia, they only have about 15 think tanks that deal with China. That's it. The number of academicians that focus on China is very limited. So you can just see.
And so much of the Australian economy revolves around international trade with China.
That's correct. They depend greatly on the Chinese market.
And how much does China depend on Australia?
None.
Almost non-existent.
None.
Less than 2% of their economy is based on imports or trade with Australia.
That's correct. But there is a much bigger picture to all this, Australia is being a member of what we call the Five Eyes. And just for our viewers to know, we will have a link under in the description as to what do we mean by the Five Eyes. Well, basically the Five Eyes is a trade between five major countries. It's Canada, United Kingdom, United States, Australia, and New Zealand. And those five countries, they share the signal intelligence between the five of them. So we can just see why it is important for the United States to ensure that Australia kind of get along with China, because Australia operates for us as our ears and eyes in that part of the world.
Do you think that this whole thing with Australia is somehow inspired by what's going on between the United States and China right now?
Well, actually, you are correct, Russ. It is, because this one now, this trade tensions or trade war between the United States and China now is spilling over to other countries. So, and this is why they always say, when you get into this trade wars, it's not going to be limited only to those countries involved. It's going to spill over to others. So, this is an example of it. So, Australia now is the result also of the US-China trade war.
Wow. What do you make of the apparent Chinese arrogance?
Well, I mean, China is growing economically. I mean, let's state the obvious.
Yes.
China is big, China is powerful, and you look at just with this quantum technology they just achieved, the 6G they just launched, the digital one. I mean, even the United States, which we're going to have a show, by the way, about the trade deficit between the United States and China. Even the United States, despite the trade war, we have imported about 51.14% of goods from China. What does it tell you? You cannot, as we always say, you cannot ignore the Chinese market. You just cannot. So, are they being a bully? For me, I will think they just, hey, we're big enough, we don't need you if we don't want you. That's basically what their statement is.
And it happens to be true.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do trade with a country, yeah, you can criticize them all you want, but at the same time, you don't dictate to them what to do. No country would want that, would you? Would you want to have somebody come to your home and said, hey, this is how you live according to my dictate?
And the cultural differences between China and Australia are astronomical.
You're absolutely correct. And this is one of the issues we don't understand. Human rights to us in the West might be different interpreted in China. To them, probably human rights means safety and security on the streets.
And hospitalization if you need it.
Yeah.
Clearly, that's not the priorities in the United States.
No, to us, the human rights aspect of it starts with the ballot box, the elections and so forth.
So it's a very different point of view.
It is indeed. And I think the Australians somehow, I'm even surprised given the proximity, because Australia is in the eastern side of China.
Yeah.
Given the proximity, I'm a little bit perplexed as to how come they don't understand the culture of China. I mean, they should, but
When I was in China, I ran into any number of Australian tourists.
Mm-hmm.
They were everywhere. And they said, we've saved our whole life to come to this. This is a really big trip for us. So to watch this relationship decline is tantamount to a tragedy for the Australian people and the Australian economy.
That's for sure, Russ. And, you know, Australia is no match for China. I mean, they need to be, they shouldn't be just following blindly. They need to be careful as to how far they can push the envelope, if you will.
Well, one of the things is they don't need the judgments. They don't need to be judging a very different culture from their own so vociferously from the top leadership in Australia.
Well, especially when they have their own atrocities that they committed.
Oh, absolutely.
Like any other country. I mean, sort of I found it very ironic that all of a sudden China is the, we're not advocating China here. It's just the idea of all of a sudden you pick in on one, come on, let's be realistic here. So.
Do you have any suspicion that they're being inspired by anybody else to do this?
Well, there is some political aspirations to all this. This didn't happen in a thin air per se, or in a vacuum, that is. Because remember, as I said earlier, Australia is a member of the Five Eyes. So, you can just see the need for at least the United States or United Kingdom for that matter to ensure that somebody closer to China keeps an eyes and ears on that part of the world. So.
Well, it seems that by cutting the rhetoric and finding a way to accommodate China is in the interest of everybody.
And that's correct, because again, the sheer size of the Chinese market, you know, if Australia is going to behave that way, all China needs to do just why not, which we're exactly doing already. They're just saying why not trading with you. So now Australia is sort of contemplating to take up this case to the World Trade Organization, the court per se. Well, can you force a country to trade with you? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, so that's all China needs to do if they don't want to.
David, for our viewers, what's the impact on us of this kind of thing?
Well, it won't be much for us, because for us, we still bring in goods from China.
At a higher rate than ever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you will think in a trade war, we will not bring much, but certainly we did. And we're going to have a show about this one. What's in it for us is the idea of what the next U.S. administration is going to do. That will be what I will be looking for as to what strategies the Biden administration is going to, or policies for that matter, the Biden administration is going to implement when it comes down to trade disputes with China. But also take into consideration that, for example, the relationship with China, why is it important? Is the big picture. So what's in it for us as far as the Australia and China tensions? Nothing. Because for us, we're still going to need to have cheap commodities here in the U.S. that is produced in China.
What would you say the bottom line is for our viewers?
Oh, it's just a tension that has nothing to do with us. So I don't see there is no interest.
Just a point of interest.
Yeah, per se.
As an aside.
That is correct. So there is not much there for us in the United States as far as how things are going to turn out between China and Australia. That's in the neighborhood, but for us, we're still going to, as I said, the next administration is going to have to really hit the ground running to figure out a resolve to this trade.
Well, as kind of a joke, the incoming administration seems to have a long history with China, not to be really focused on in this show.
That's correct. That's correct. Well, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other videos, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Thanks for watching, and as always, stay informed. Till next time.